Hi. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Todd Butler. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I'm really happy to welcome you to our very first all-college meeting. I've been here about 18 years, and this is the first time, I think, at least in my memory, that we've ever done anything like this. I was talking to a dean of one of the smaller colleges this summer, and he said to me, well, this summer we got all our faculty together and we just sat them down and we talked about things. And I said, you did what? For those of you who don't know, we have over 700 faculty and staff in the college across all our campuses, and so I wondered if we would have to rent out Beasley or anything like that. Obviously we don't. This is something that we're doing hybrid, but I thought we'd give it a try. Anyways, so some housekeeping notes. First of all, it is a hybrid event with both in-person attendees who are masked as required. The first 3 rows of Brian have been left unoccupied, and since I'm up here alone, I'm allowed to have my mask off. But I'm grateful for everyone's cooperation, not only today, but throughout this year in terms of masking protocols. The music is accompanying the community slideshow that was being shown, was being provided by 2 very talented pianists from the School of Music. First, you just heard Leah Terrell at the keyboard. Is Leah still back there? Can you come out so we can... Leah is a second-year master's student in music performance, and as we were talking at the start, she's one of our master's students who started online this past year. So she is a first year on campus, but thank you very much for that, Leah. So following the Q&A, we'll replay that community slideshow, and you'll hear Fletcher Steele on the piano as well. He's a junior double majoring in music and architecture. And as I said, we'll have a Q&A after my presentation. For those of you who are here in person and want to ask a question, there's a microphone right here at the head of the table. And for our virtual attendees, you can use the chat feature on the YouTube feed. We have someone monitoring the comments who will relay questions to me. Now, if there are multiple or related questions, we'll summarize and combine them. So we'll get to it. The theme of today's presentation is today and tomorrow, and I'll be sharing information about where the college is now and a framework for where we might go in the future. Now, thanks to the pandemic, however, we also have a few yesterday things to catch up on as well. Between March of 2020 and August 2021, our faculty, staff, and students missed out on a number of traditions that celebrate their contributions and achievements. Now, given that, I'd like to take just a few minutes to acknowledge several important categories of those sort of things. Together, these represent nearly 300 awards and achievements that we have not been able to celebrate. Now, I'd very much rather like to congratulate and recognize folks individually, but the size of our college and the breadth of our achievements really prevent that here. Nevertheless, I'd like to at least remedy it a little bit, and right now. So, the WSU Showcase Awards, which represent the highest of achievements in scholarship, teaching, and service, were among the first events affected by the pandemic. In the past 2 years, 12 of our colleagues were selected for these awards, which included recognition for exceptional teaching, research, performance in staff roles, leadership, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and commitment to equity and inclusion. Their work has placed our college once again at the pinnacle of achievements at WSU. Now, here in the College of Arts and Sciences, our annual awards recognition and social gathering has also been twice deferred. We've conferred 55 awards for students, staff, and faculty over these past 2 years, and more important, we've missed the occasion not only to congratulate those people we know, but also to learn more about the achievements and the passions of the colleagues we haven't yet met. So out in the lobby here in Bryan Hall and on the screen now, there are 2 miniature versions of our usual awardee poster gallery. There's also a website for each year where you can, at your leisure, read about our awardees from the past 2 years. And we'll also put the web address in the online chat. Promotion and tenure are also major milestones for faculty, moments that they have worked for years, building and sustaining careers that place them on the path not to rest on their laurels, but to pursue new questions and challenges in labs, studios, classrooms, archives, and the wider world. In 2020, 33 faculty took this next step in their careers, and in 2021, 34 more, 67 altogether. Now, length of service milestones are a hallmark of the WSU community. This is especially true lately when, to be honest, 1 year has felt more like 2 or 3. So in the fall of 2020, 102 College of Arts and Sciences faculty and staff from 19 units and 3 campuses were recognized for their ongoing service to the university. And according to the HRS website, the 2021 length of service honorees will be recognized at an event in the upcoming month. Now, the final group I want to share with you today and ask you just to remember a moment of our outstanding seniors that were selected by the academic department or school, and for 2 years in a row, we've missed being able to celebrate the accomplishments of these more than 50 students and the advisors, staff and faculty who encouraged them along the way, and you might be able to recognize some of them up here that you've worked with as well. And so with that, at least, for all those people, if you're here in the room, if you're online, or if somebody can just tell them, we clap for them. Now, each of these recognitions, no matter what the awards were, is built upon a much larger series of moments, of early mornings, of late nights, of frustrations and challenges and small victories that together constitute our daily lives. Now, all these components of our professional and personal lives and the labor that attends them have been challenged and changed by the past 2 years of the pandemic. That those challenges have been near universal doesn't mean they also should be recognized. So I want to say thank you to all of you for the moments that you balanced work and home, where you thought you weren't in balance, where you walked by and wondered how you were going to get your kids into their next Zoom session, how you were going to find time amidst your own concerns about family and friends and yourselves to think about others, your students, how you were going to run that class, how you were going to open your lab, what that would look like. I don't have an award for that, but I have a deep gratitude for what you've been able to accomplish. And so with that, and thinking about that, I want to talk a bit as a brief update about where the college and the university stands in regards to COVID, and then provide a brief fiscal update and some thoughts on where we are headed and what we might accomplish together in the next decade. And I think I'm allowed to drive the slide right now. Oops. Oh, I'm going backwards. Sorry. Here we go. You get to see them again. So a brief COVID update. Now, I understand the challenges of being optimistic at this point of view, so I'd like instead to at least be hopeful. And that hope is grounded upon the fact that our student vaccination rates, first of all, are sustained and exceptional. This is from 1020, you'll see the compliance percentage range is at Pullman at the top from 92% down towards Everett at 70% as some of these campuses begin gearing up and contacting students who perhaps aren't regularly on campus. But the striking thing about it, and why I say they're sustained, is even as Pullman, and I hope this is a model, and I've seen it for Vancouver and Tri-Cities, as the compliance rate increases, the rate of vaccination has stayed the same. If you would have told me in June or July, then in October, 95% of our student body here in Pullman and elsewhere would be vaccinated, I would have been ecstatic, and I still am. We have exceptionally high employee vaccination rates. My spreadsheet in Workday for all the compliance numbered about 1,400 faculty and staff and student employees. More than 1,300 of them, first of all, took care of their compliance. Thank you just for that. That's another one of those moments where a small moment was happened over 1,300 times. The 100 actually is a lot of double counts. So particular thank you to the students who did this whole process twice for that. And the last thing that's worth saying is, although we had, as part of the country, did significant jumps in July, August in our campuses and our communities in terms of case rates in the wider communities, we are seeing those drop similarly significantly now, whether it's in Clark County, in Vancouver, the counties around Tri-Cities, and here in Pullman. They're still too high. And that's something that we work with as well. I will say for those of you in, if you take a look at the Whitman County case rates, Whitman County is now dropped into, and Pullman, sorry, in particular, has dropped into a moderate spread rate and is about midway through it, and that rate's been dropping. And it's because y'all have been responsible and done what we needed to do. So that's why I'm hopeful. There's one other reason I have to admit why I'm hopeful. About an hour and a half ago, if you haven't checked your Twitter feed, the FDA's Independent Vaccine Advisory Board approved, or at least encouraged the approval of emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine for children ages 5 to 11. I just put my 10-year-old on a plane today with her K94 mask to go on a trip that she deferred for a year, and so I'm excited about that, and it's another reason to be hopeful. So a little bit about where we're at right now in terms of the fiscal challenges and some news. And I call them role challenges for a reason that I'll explain in a minute. And like universities across the country, WSU did face system-wide challenges regarding enrollment and also auxiliary services. And what I mean by that are housing and dining, for example, and other functions that also similarly expect and rely upon a set of enrollments that were radically changed because of COVID. Now, those are differentiated across the system. You'll see, as a residential campus, for example, there were certain impacts in Pullman that weren't felt in Tri-Cities and Vancouver, and similarly, those campuses are faced with challenges that are distinct to their areas. For example, community college enrollment in the state of Washington and elsewhere in many areas dropped precipitously, and those are major feeders for our universities as we move forward. So that's what I mean by differentiated impacts. The other challenge, of course, was the enrollment declines. The enrollment losses were not evenly distributed across freshmen through seniors. In fact, as you might see, that juniors and seniors who are what I would call stickier students, they have more invested in their careers, more sunk costs, if you will, and similarly are closer to finishing. There's a much higher incentive to complete, to return, as opposed to first and second year students who are, as we saw, potentially more vulnerable to these sort of enrollment declines. And why that matters for our college is compared to engineering, to business, to education, the College of Arts and Sciences, because of its unique role at WSU and its unique responsibility, actually takes more than half of its student credit hours, its student enrollments from first and second year students. Now, I don't make any apologies for that, actually. It is an honor to get to do that and be the gateway to what it means to be in college and to serve that role for this campus, and we've been asked to do it, and we do it time and time again. But it does put us in a slightly different impact when you have enrollment declines among first years students last year during a whole online year, some challenges regarding retention, and then a smaller class this year. Ideally, however, we will also be the first to benefit from a return to improved enrollments. And there is a sense of that. So I do think, even though this is probably one of the more challenging budget years for the college, we are turning the corner. There were late-breaking increases in enrollments for our college, and people were returning back into our campuses. I think it's important to say, especially to students who are watching, this might sound very instrumental, that we're concerned about enrollments in terms of budgets, and that's certainly true. But fundamentally, when we think about the role that we have as a college, it's about ensuring and supporting and enabling through your education the goals that you have and that we share with you for your communities, for yourselves, and so that matters just as much as anything on a ledger sheet. Similarly, and I want to recognize people across our college, our advisors, our staff, the people who cleared out financial holds, all those sort of things. We had less melt than we were afraid of we were going to have. And what I mean by melt is that retention loss from, say, first year to second year. And that's a testament not only to all those staff, faculty who are engaged with them, but the resilience of our students to come back. And the other good news is that as we talked about what we do and the centrality of what we do to this college and this university, that message is being heard. I spent time, as all academics deans did, in budget hearings this summer, and explaining the situation as to where we are resulted, as some of you might have seen earlier, significant what I call role support, that is, but it really turned into budgetary support for the College of Arts and Sciences that will allow us to operate this year not at an annual deficit, and doing so in a way that protected the core of our faculty and our students and our staff and the positions that they hold that enable us to do this work. So that's why I'm hopeful about where we're headed budget-wise. And we are still hiring, too, across our units. But my conclusion, and this is something I've shared with chairs and directors, share with our leadership, is that it's also time to begin telling the next phase of our story. And that's really where I want to begin thinking about today. And it centers for me around this idea of reimagining what it means to be a land-grant university. And this is my hope and my vision, I don't like the word vision, to be honest with you, because it sounds too much like strategic plan, and we'll get to that at some point. But this is what I want, and this is what we need to do, which is that the College of Arts and Sciences will return the liberal arts to the heart of the land-grant university. And there are reasons for that that I think affect really deeply the purpose of this university and the purpose of why it was established more than 100 years ago. And I want to identify 4 foundations of change that begin to help me think about why we have to think about our role, promote our role, and to think about it differently. The first foundation of the change that we need to begin thinking about in terms of our land-grant mission is about that whole notion of who we are. And in particular, we can't accept that the notion, except in a very narrow sense, the notion of the land that originally supported us was granted to us is unsustainable. Historically, that's not how this worked. And in fact, what you see here, this map is my version, I guess, in some ways, of the land acknowledgement that is often read here. This isn't my version. It comes from, and they'll drop it in the chat, a series, an exceptional series done by High Country News, which actually data mined the exact parcels of native and indigenous lands that were sold in order to originally support the establishment of land-grant universities. You can find these across the nation for Cornell, for North Carolina State University, all these things. And I look at this because it reminds us that these aren't abstract things, that these are specific, each dot is a specific parcel, an acre or more of land that was sold. And to recognize that means that we need to begin thinking about new obligations, pre-existing obligations, but newly recognized obligations on land-grant universities towards redefining what equity means, what access means, and what social mobility means. The second one is that there have been population and economic shifts since the establishment of the Morrill Act. Rural areas, there's been a shift, obviously, from rural to urban areas, but also those rural areas similarly have become increasingly diverse And in certain areas, there is real in-migration coming in areas. And a majority, in fact, of the non-metro jobs, which is how it's done, are set up in manufacturing, trade, and services rather than in agriculture. Now, what this means is we have a substantially different set of publics to serve, and that we exist on a rural and urban continuum. Third foundation of change that we have to recognize is our society is marked by increasingly rapid technological shifts and advancements. And that universities are part of that process of shifts. We do the foundational research that often enables them, but we do not always lead these shifts. In fact, sometimes we are called to be in conversation, if not opposition, to some of them. And the fourth one is that our greatest challenges today have multiple dimensions and causes. COVID's taught us that. We need to develop the science behind an mRNA vaccine and then think about what are the policies and procedures that attach to it, what's the history, what's the sociology that connects to that vaccine uptake, and that solving those problems, addressing those problems increasingly requires the integration of multiple perspectives, and that is the ideal situation for a College of Arts and Sciences that runs the gamut from fine arts to physics to lead. And so this is where I want to move from a notion of just interdisciplinarity to truly integrative research, teaching, and service. I'll use an analogy that I've used before, that interdisciplinarity is like a buffet at a casino, where you have pick out a couple chicken wings, some Jell-O, a salad here and there. Integrative is a finely composed meal in which there are multiple different elements working towards a common experience. And this is taken from a book that I've been reading lately, that qualities of integrative thinkers that I think distinctively mark our college is that we take a broad view of what is salient to a question, that there are complicating factors that we insert into conversations that might be solely technical or professional in our absence. We consider multilinear and non-causal relationships, and we search for resolutions to tensions rather than accept unpleasant trade-offs. And so I spent some time thinking about where I think we will have 4 key focal points moving forward. These are areas potentially of strategic investment at the college level, but also a context in which we can understand the individual work that we do as faculty, as staff, and as departments. This is not to replace individual strengths within disciplines or within units, but is to give a sense of how do we knit those together. I'll say a few things about each one of these. The first two, environment and climate change and public and community health, will sound common to you because these are themes and issues that WSU as a university has pursued for several years. And the reason in part is that they're up there is that the College of Arts and Sciences has a significant amount to contribute in these, and I'll insist that that's the case across our research and teaching. Health is not isolated in one campus or one area. Environment isn't either. Equity, inclusion, and justice is pulled out here not because equity, inclusion, and justice doesn't fit into environment, climate change, public health, but because it deserves its own right and its own attention rather than simply being a complementary or supplementary element. And this last one, this data and technology at the boundaries, helps me illustrate what I mean about the integrative nature of our knowledge. That we have knowledge that operates and investigates the boundaries, from a scientist who right now in the chemistry department with the assistance of a new piece of equipment is looking at how we can examine the molecular levels of radioactive materials at a boundary of materials, to at some point thinking through, as this society should have done 10 years ago, what it means to think about high-performance computing and what it does to populations. We're in the psychology department, how we use technologies to understand the boundaries of human aging and how to adapt to them. And these go together, actually. As we think about, for example, the possibilities of us in WSU and through physics and materials engineering joining the Northwest Quantum Nexus, at the same time there are quantum scientists who are also calling for an ethics around quantum? What does it mean if we can actually do high performance computing at this scale that we've never been able to do before? And what are the deep social and political and historical implications of being able to do that sort of thing? This is where the College of Arts and Sciences can make a contribution in those areas as well as the others. So in our research and scholarship and creativity, my hope is that we will, at least at the college level, prioritize cross-cutting inquiry that integrates multiple fields and colleges and units, and that we will be oriented outward in terms of delivering results and in conceiving the questions and partnerships with communities. And that means that we have to begin thinking more seriously, as we already have, many of you already have, about how do we engage beyond the individual and the discipline. And this always brings up a question of, well, how do we marry foundational research and public engagement? And I think this is how I understand it. And I'd invite a conversation about this at any point. That is, foundational research is not incompatible with public engagement, but I think it's a fundamental prerequisite for it. In part, it's only through a deep understanding of disciplines that we can present the knowledge necessary and, quite frankly, often lacking in discussions about community betterment. I'll give you an example, say out of the history department, that several of our history faculty in the aftermath of the events in Washington on January 6th were able to produce in short order nationally recognized public opinion pieces regarding what had just happened. And I'd suggest that being able to do that intellectually, rigorously, thoughtfully in 48 hours required a career's worth of engagement. The same questions we have when we think about what are the impacts of plastics on the environment, microplastics, or on forestry, and ecology, when we start thinking about where the impacts of pollution. It's that deep knowledge that actually enables us to do that kind of work. So in teaching, I'd like to pursue something that, or at least begin thinking about, moving us from what I call a line to a loop. One of the concerns that I think I've had and that I've talked with many of you about is that in many ways education, higher education, is looked at very linearly. You graduate from high school, you go into college, you clear out your U-core as fast as possible and get yourself into a major as fast as possible, and that will get you an initial job. It's linear, and it's not how the liberal arts works, and it's not how higher education should work. What I'd like to do is begin thinking more about it in terms of loops. A combination of experiential and classroom education, that is, you pursue a classroom education and you have a research experience, or that you, in a summer, have a high-impact practice somewhere, an internship, that allows you then to come back into the classroom a different student and allows faculty to talk about their work in different ways. That can be exploratory as well as focus, and it can be for people at all life stages. So, a couple things that come about this. I've always found it kind of funny that, that we talk about public engagement, and we perhaps don't acknowledge that students are part of the public. They are, in fact, at times even our best representative, our best product in shaping the public and enabling them to make a difference in their communities. I also think that the liberal arts courses are not just, and what we have to offer, are not solely introductory courses, although they are foundational to shaping a broad way of thinking. But there's also advanced courses that we can offer to disciplines elsewhere that need the kind of advanced knowledge that we provide. Similarly, experiential learning, and then a place for alumni and adult learners to loop back to WSU. And in case you think, well, what does this last mean, or that means continuing education, I'd suggest, just as a point of consideration, this is grad school too. So partnership and service, and part of my thinking about this has been informed by the long conversations that we engaged in regarding the One WSU system idea, and in fact that you saw come out today. And I'm supportive of that. I'm supportive, not surprisingly, of the engagement, the local engagement, the need to serve. And I want to add an element that, or at least a perspective that I think is distinctive to our college and how we've built departments and units across campuses. And the first one, I think, is, and I've asserted this in any number of conversations, that our capacity to engage in the local, paradoxically, and especially for our college, which has built an architecture of academics around shared faculty, shared experiences, depends upon our ability to connect with each other. And in fact, I think our university works best when we can bring the full resources of our dispersed system to individual communities. An incredible value proposition for our university and for what our college can be is that when we engage in Chelan, when we engage in Portland, when we engage in Richland, that we are bringing the knowledge potentially of Pullman and Vancouver and Everett and all these other places to those communities. And that our particular engagements, here's the other thing, can create models of national and international significance. That the working in the local, I wrote about this in Inside Higher Ed, does not mean that we are somehow not doing something of deep significance. And to illustrate my point, we've been working in the college, for example, with multiple colleges here on some considerations regarding mental health. And it comes from an ability to think through our unique position that's been enhanced in some ways by the pandemic to be able to serve rural, remote, and underserved communities in Eastern Washington. Because the interesting thing about the state of Washington, at least in terms of mental health, is that on a kind of statewide level, we have more than the national average of mental health care providers in the state per population. But guess where they're mostly located? Right here. In fact, as this little map shows, almost the entire rest of the state, for one reason or another, is federally designated as a professional shortage area for mental health care. We clearly have engagements here and here and in these communities here, but the interesting thing about this is this same pattern repeats in states across the country. In the state that I spent my graduate work in, North Carolina, it is the exact same thing, except you can replace Seattle, King, and Pierce County with Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte. What we do locally, and when we engage locally, and we do with foundational research, which we do with our outreach, actually positions us to speak to deep national and international concerns. So there's one last thing, and then I'll stop, which is amidst all of this, one of the most profound and powerful qualities of the liberal arts that we can't abandon is pursuing and valuing and encouraging, both in ourselves and other students, what I call moments of wonder, the questions that you ask why, without necessarily a purpose. Why do molecules work this way? Who do we value in the world? Why do we value them? How can we make our world a better place, even if we don't know the answer to that? It's that catalytic effect of purposeful yet purposeless inquiry that ultimately helps define the liberal arts, and that the land-grant university very, very much needs. So, that's it. Thanks. So, now you can ask me questions. There were a couple that were brought up prior to that, and so as you think about what you might want to say or ask or even just talk to me about, I have to even see what time it is. Good. I'll answer a couple of the ones that came up. One, I had a question from a student saying, well, what are we going to do about instruction now that cases are rising? And I'm assuming what she meant out of that was the rapid increase in rising cases from July into August and such, because as I noted, at least now from the perspective of October, those case rates are declining, although I don't say that they're where we'd like them to be. Our college will maintain that focus on face-to-face instruction interaction. At the same time, we've really been encouraging And hopefully more of this can happen given that we've got a 3-month lead time, or now 2-month lead time before the start of spring semester, rather than a 2 to 3 week lead time, of the kind of modifications to pedagogy, to hybrid teaching that reflect kind of rethinking of how best to deliver courses at scale, but also with engagement. So I think I'll just say right here that this is something that I want our college, to the extent that faculty and students even have enough gas left in the tank to be thinking about that sort of thing, that conversation is absolutely open within the college to be thinking about our students in pedagogy in a new way. Another question, then I'm going to stop, and you can ask me questions. There are a couple others, but one of the questions came up in regards to budget, and in regards to, in particular, what we can do to support graduate students and increase graduate student stipends. That's a real challenge. I think one of the core things that is necessary if we're really going to address this comprehensively and address disparities not only within the college, but also, to be honest, between our university and peer universities, is we're going to need a significant infusion from the university as it rethinks some of its budget models. To illustrate that just a little bit, and I did a back of the envelope, and I'm going to stress back of the envelope calculation in our college, that to increase graduate student stipends by, say, $2,000 for every graduate student on TA-ship or RA-ship that's paid for by the college, not people who are on grants, so I even eliminated those out, would cost in the neighborhood of $800,000 a year annually. Now that's just a number at this point, but it's a significant number, and my first priority within the college was to stabilize and regularize our budget commitments, and we've done that. And then we have to think about, well, where do we get that kind of money and get it in a way that is reliable and likely to be sustained over the course of not just one graduate cohort's career, but as a permanent replacement. And that's what we'll be looking at now. It does not mean, though, that we cannot begin by trying to identify the most kind of challenging and targeted areas of inequity and working with departments to try to address those. And that's something that I'm committed to doing in spring semester and providing through your chairs an update before graduate students come to campus at the start of August of next year. So I'll pause just for a second. Or you could just raise your hand too if you want, if you don't want to come up, and I'll just repeat the question. Okay, I had one more from the previously submitted one there in pocket, but then I'm really totally serious. Like I could just keep talking. One of the other questions was, how are we going to support the faculty in particular that have come here under the Provost Cluster Hire Initiative? For those of you who don't know, it's been on race and social inequalities in the Americas, and our college has been really exceptionally successful in bringing to securing those lines, 3 and then another 2 this year, and there's going to be another cycle, and we're going to go after those as well. And so I think I've been thinking about how to answer that in a couple ways, and my first answer is we are going to try to support all our faculty. And that's not to dismiss it, but it is to recognize that when we brought faculty here over the past 2 years, and that we've really been more committed to making those kind of questions regarding equity and inclusion and engagement with communities, we brought exceptional faculty here. And so the chairs and directors will tell you that the first question I asked in my first town hall pre-meeting with the president and the provost, and actually I stumbled over them and didn't even let them get a chance to introduce themselves really nicely, because I was excitedly interested in how are we going to secure pay raises for faculty and staff. And I'm happy to say that that's a commitment that the university shares. So in the first instance, it's about supporting faculty as faculty and in their research, in their work, and their teaching. That being said, we will continue to seek to grow not only resources out of the Provost Cluster Hire Initiative, but where we can supplement them, and we've already done that with multiple hires over the past couple of years in doing that, because there's a cohort effect that we're trying to develop here. At the same token, we also need to begin recognizing changes in our promotion and tenure processes that support the kind of work that these faculty have been asked to do and want to do, and that, in fact, many of our faculty want to do. So we've already become the first college, as far as I know, academic college at this university, to have explicit statements regarding the value of publicly engaged work across fields, and the willingness expressed in black letter in faculty tenure and promotion reviews to source letters from professionals of practice, experienced professionals of practice in a community. And so we need to begin continue building a support architecture for the kind of work that we want these folks to do and that we want ourselves to be held accountable for. Some of that, I'd suggest the next element in regards to this is, and I've suggested this in print before, is I'd like to begin thinking about, for example, recognizing that in questions of national and international prominence, that we recognize sustained and equitable partnerships with sovereign indigenous nations as meeting the national and international standard. It's not how we've often thought about the word international, but it's to do right by those assertions and building those kind of support structures out, not only for the faculty that we brought in under the Provost Cluster Hire, but also for all our faculty who want to be engaged in this work is one answer to that question, though it's not a complete one. Okay. Okay.
I'll be the one, kid. You only wanted to.
Yeah, please.
Right? So
I can hear you, and then I'll just repeat it so that people online can hear it.
So the integrated model,
Yeah.
it necessitates structural change, right? To accommodate team teaching, to accommodate indigenous rhetoric. What are some of those structural changes and ideas that you would deem the college is considering to realize its integrated philosophy or effort to reimagine college art and science?
Sure. So one of the questions, or the question that came out, and tell me if I get it right, is as we think about an integrative model, particularly in regards to teaching, areas like team teaching and such, what are the structural changes that we're considering to enable that sort of work? Is that right, David?
Yes.
Okay. I think team teaching is really an excellent example of the extent to which a really narrow calculus on enrollments has challenged us in doing that, because the immediate question is, well, where's credit? And who gets credit, and how is that divided? So I think the first question is loosening the restrictions on unit heads to begin thinking about the opportunities to enable team teaching within current contracts and contracted loads. That, in many ways, I will just say right here that we're open to have those conversations about what would it look like for your unit to want to work across disciplines. That also, I think, may entail allowing, say in the example of statistics, for example, a graduate level of statistics is allowing a single class to serve the need for multiple disciplines and allow people to teach outside of their department in an established course. And I think that those are areas where, in terms of that kind of support, I think team teaching is something that we have to think about the barriers, which are at times perceptual as much as they are economic. I'd also want to say that I think we need, and we've highlighted this, I spent some time with donors over the past weekend of highlighting the need for better support for students and faculty who want to engage in this sort of work, and also to engage in the kind of outside of classroom experiences that can integrate those experiences into the classroom. And in particular, to provide additional funding as one of our primary fundraising goals, to provide additional support for students who are pursuing laboratory research, engaged research, and to provide support through those funds to students, not only students, but also their mentors, and to reduce the potential equity gap in that kind of work between students who can afford to do that work and students who have to work for their education to do so. So I think there's an element of private fundraising to enable work, but also removing instructional barriers in regards to credit and counting and workloads on that. And I think a lot of things can actually be operated on a pilot project rather than at scale. I think that's the other challenge. So if there are areas, David or anybody else where you say, I'd really like to work together with someone from history or elsewhere, or chemistry even, I'd actually encourage you to ask those questions, and at the very least to figure out why we can't do them. Can you say a little bit more, just since we're in a conversation about, or anybody, about what are the barriers to doing that? Can you help me see them? Because I can't see you.
Maybe disciplinary rhetoric.
Okay, what do you mean, Squeak?
What are the difference in how we communicate about our research, how we measure it, what it serves in the end, solving a problem, or is it just acknowledging one?
So one of the challenges then, if I understand, is that disciplinary language, rhetoric, but also orientations where you encounter some disciplines that are solution-oriented versus acknowledging and teasing out a problem?
I think so. I think I see that metric carried through in grants and awards across the university. That the vantage point fulfills certain disciplines better than others insofar as how you approach that. So I can see maybe in your statistics example, two different kinds of statistics having a real conflict in understanding what's the end point. I can do extremely finite statistics, of course.
Sure. So and again, just if you can hear, or if you're online, one of the barriers is potentially that certain grant programs, certain funding sources within the university are oriented or more favorable to a certain type of approach to knowledge and knowledge making. Is that right? Yeah. I think you have seen in some of the grants and fellowships work that we have been trying to support in our college, the interdisciplinary seed grants out of our college. And Courtney, can you tell me the exact name, because I know I just got it wrong? The IRIS grants, okay, interdisciplinary research grants. Actually stipulated as part of that support the ability to and the willingness to cross disciplines, have more than individuals from more than one discipline in them as actually a prerequisite for pursuing and securing them. And so if there are occasions that we can incentivize that kind of conversation and make those clashes a benefit, if not a prerequisite for that kind of support, then I think that's another avenue to doing that.
Well, it just seems that we have a solution for research. It seems we can adapt that for teaching, be able to apply and use that model for an integrated teaching experience, like a pilot.
You mean so taking the IRIS model and piloting it out to integrative teaching opportunities? Okay, that's something to look at as well. And I think actually it fits another element of integrative work, which is that we often talk about, for as much as we often talk about research and teaching as sometimes incompatible or kind of divergent draws. And to some extent they can be, just because of time. But I think there's elements where we can cross-pollinate those models. Other questions? Is there anything online, just so I don't miss it, Adrian? No. Okay. Well, it's 4 o'clock, and I think I'm supposed to let you go at 4. Is that right? What's that? I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear you, Joanna. What's that? Oh, well, are they here? Fletcher? Okay. Well, at the very least, I can say thank you. And that's something that's worth saying right now as well a lot. Thank you for joining me today. I was saying to somebody as we were walking in that last time I had this feeling in some ways was when I had first graduated and I had my first real apartment and I was having my first party and I didn't know if anybody was going to show up. So regardless if you're here or if you're having a Zoom happy hour, if it's the latter, I'm jealous. But thank you for coming, for asking me questions. If you have additional feedback or comments or ideas to share, I'd really actually welcome you emailing them and having that conversation. It's one thing that our college does well and should be at the heart of this kind of liberal arts work is to be able to engage in ideas that sometimes don't even have solutions, but have pathways towards them. My thanks also to the Dean's Office support staff, to the communications team, and for our student ambassadors, for all the behind-the-scenes organization for today's event. And to wrap things up, we are going to run the community slideshow again. I hope, is Fletcher here now? I can't play the piano. I'll be honest, my mother told me when I quit that I would regret it, and Fletcher's here to save. That sort of day. Please, for those of you in person, please eat their cookies in the lobby. And honestly, thank you for being here with us and being part of the CAS family. And it is a requisite thing that after I say have a good rest of your day and week, I say go Cougs. But thanks.